All right, so it looks like we're pretty across the let me make sure everyone's muted. Wish there was just like there's probably just like a mute all. It's like mute everyone. But oh, there it is. Command, I think it's Command Option M, but I hope that minimized my screen. Anyway, okay, so let's get back to what we're just talking about. Okay, so with React 2, we wanted you to sort of get a chance to like build something with a more sophisticated data set, and then also get a chance to see like some styles get applied to your application now. So it looks like there are a couple who aren't like super sure on things, but that's fine. We'll make sure that you are going forward. We'll make sure that you get the help that you need to see, to expose yourself to and to work with React, because going forward, everything front end that we do is going to be built around React. Even when you get in the back end, there's a lab that you're writing an API and a bunch of Mongo queries. The client itself is built in React, so you could easily walk through that client. So yes, there's a lot to it. It takes a lot to learn. You're not just going to learn it in 1 week. Those of you who had been exposed to it beforehand, you had the upper hand on this sprint, this lab for sure. But yeah, take what you have learned and then just apply it into the next lab, which is going to be on Redux. So Eric asked, is Ember pretty much the same as React? So I can't speak to that, especially with Ember 2. I've only used Ember 1. And no, they're very different. React is a view layer, okay? So Ember would be like an entire opinionated, sophisticated model view controller, full-fledged framework, all right? With React, it's only the V in MVC, so it's only the view layer in MVC. So what that means is it's really just an unopinionated but like pretty sophisticated API that you can use to build user interfaces. So it's really just lightweight and as fluid as you want it to be. It's nothing more than that React in and of itself. In fact, React itself used to come with React DOM as part of its package, and then also used to come with prop types as part of its package, but they've since taken those things out of it and add them into their own packages, or at least abstracted them away from the framework itself, or library, I should say. So if anyone ever says, well, React is a framework, much like Ember or Angular, well, that's true, but you need a lot of other things to make it become a framework. Some of the stuff that you need to make it become a framework are client-side routing. So the implementation of a router with like React Router, which you're going to be using. And then sort of this idea of using models and controllers to bind your views, so to bind your React components to a state model or a state machine that you can basically wrap your app around. And that's called like Flux or Redux or MobX. You guys are going to be learning Redux today. I'm not going to be teaching you Redux. In fact, it's Thompson who's going to be taking over that. But I will be here. I have quite a bit of experience with Redux. It's probably the most complicated thing that we teach in this course for new learners and intro to JavaScript in general, because you've just spent your time like looking at all this weird syntax with components, looking at this like weird stuff. All this like HTML looking stuff that's just JSX, right? And then like architecting out your components. And now we're going to take that and really take state away from you and shove everything through this loop called Redux. And so I won't go into that too much, but Ember would be like a full-on MVC framework, just like Angular and Angular 2 or Angular 4 or whatever they call it now. But React would just be like just the view layer. So if you take React, what we've been doing with React, that's all it's been, is just the view layer. But if you add React Router and Redux to it, it then becomes more of an MVC style. You add your binding and things like that. So with React Redux, yes, it would be similar to the paradigm that Ember presents. But it's my understanding that Ember has a very sophisticated and opinionated, like imperative programming style, meaning they sort of create their own syntax. Well, we do too with React, because it's like we have this HTML stuff inside of JavaScript, right? But yeah, it's my understanding that Ember sort of abstracts everything away from you, and you enter into Emberland, and you're just sort of wrapped in this world of I have to do things a certain way, and if I don't abide by those laws, then I'm screwed, right? You can't eject from the Ember paradigm. With React, it's built so that you can just take the library itself and inject it into any existing app. So it's really lightweight, it's really simple. All it is just one piece of that framework set. I think Ember is probably really cool. It's worth maybe looking into. We're not going to teach it in this course. In fact, I think Redux and React Router is the only like MVC we teach you, but we're thinking about doing a little workshop with Vue.js, because I have a cousin who's really like excited about Vue.js and he wants to teach people about it. And I'm like, yeah, well, the school you can come and teach it at. So we may get him to come in and do a little workshop on Vue.js, which is it's Vue, and it's sort of like if Angular and React had like a baby, right? If they procreated, and the outcome of that would be like a reactive virtual DOM with like these little miniature directive type things. So anyway, the cool thing about JavaScript is there's so much like opinions, so many opinions out there, because there's no standard. Like if you were to go and build a car and want to sell that car in the US, you have a list of standards, right, that you have to abide by. There's no such thing like that in JavaScript. Even the language like Java is controlled by Oracle, right, and like .NET by Microsoft. So they have a standard, like this is how you do things, right? And so with JavaScript, it's kind of the wild, wild west. And we haven't really landed on a bunch of standards. I think web components is probably the closest thing to standards that we're going to get to. And then, 10 years from now, the landscape's going to be all functional programming and like a standard like set of principles that we abide by. Maybe JavaScript's pertinent in 10 years. Maybe it's not. You never know. Like, there's so many cool things out there. But what's cool about JavaScript is it's in demand, and everyone needs people who are familiar with JavaScript, even if you're not working on the front end of an application. You need to be able to like read JavaScript code and understand what's going on and understand its intricacies and why it's weird and stuff like that. So, but yeah, once we land in that place, we may actually get to a more sophisticated like spot, as opposed to this like, well, here's an opinion this week. And, this company is backing this framework. They're dumping a lot of money and engineering time into it, et cetera. Like Angular is just all Google, right? It's the Google team. So anyway, yeah, that's a really good question. I love talking about this geeky stuff. What's the cool thing about this framework? Unfortunately, I haven't used anything new with Ember. I haven't used Ember since, 2014. And it was just because I was thrown into a dev environment where they were using it, and then they're like, no, we're using Angular now. And it's like, okay, cool. So I had to like rewrite a website that was built in Ember. I had to like take it out and build it in a different way, like just a totally different thing. So, okay, cool. So let's talk about our projects. So, thumbs up, thumbs down, I guess you guys you gave me a pulse on it, but I just want to know, like, this comment, it's going to be all caps because I hit the caps lock button. So I'm not yelling at you, I promise. Like, thumbs up, or I guess check mark or X, did you love this project? Was it just kind of like meh? Was it like awesome for you? I'm going to put a meh face, like a bread. So I'm thinking, or was it really, really tough and difficult? So that's fine if it's tough and difficult, but we want to make sure that like we're turning these red X's into questions. So for those of us, let's start by just like getting a couple questions out of those of us. You can either ask in Slack, like, where do you want us to start with this solution piece? CSS part, cool. All right, that's good because I actually have a terribly styled app right now, and we can go through like how I would approach styling it with this. So yeah, styling is going to be the hardest part. If you really need help with styling, the real person to ask on staff would be Ivan. He's spent the last couple of years, or the last year and a half, I guess, at Blizzard. Basically, yes, Frank, we'd love to see your stuff. So that's going to be something we'll do. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of walk through like my thought process around a solution. We'll style some things together, and then the last half hour of this, I want to like show off each other's apps. So back to this like idea of CSS. If you need help with anything CSS, like Ivan can do it. Like he is fantastic with this stuff. In fact, get to know Ivan. He's someone who you should lean on heavily when it comes to a lot of things because he's just amazing. And he's been at Blizzard like building these massive like websites that like take like millions of users hit them, and they need to be performant, and they need to have animations, and he knows all this cool stuff. So all right, so let me share my screen, and you guys are gonna laugh, so no judgment here. This is just me sharing like my implementation so far on these things. Cool. So all right, get that out of here. All right, so you can see that, I mean, I could have spent, a little bit more time and gotten things buttoned up a little bit. I could have done a header up here on the search bar, but at least I turned these little images into circles and then fit the screen background to these images here. So, I mean, I have a functioning application, all right? So you can see that here, it actually is at least passing, the specification, all right? So that to be said, let me just show you how I go about styling my React applications with using just vanilla CSS. Now, one thing that's cool in a package that I recommend you guys look at is something called Glamorous. You guys received, not that, thanks Fergie, but yeah, I'm sure Kent Dodds is stoked that when you Google Glamorous, Fergie comes up, the song from Fergie. Okay, so this package, you guys met the owner in the brown bag, and he talked to you about Glamorous. So there's this like really opinionated deal today called CSS in JavaScript. All right, so if you want to see kind of what this looks like, and maybe as you continue to grow with your React development, you could start styling components this way. I highly recommend it. He's got some cool, like a Twitch tutorial on how to install and get up and running with Glamorous that maybe in your free time you could go check out and just take a look at things. But if you look at this, if you see sort of his inspiration behind this, it's that we have this idea where we can write just JavaScript objects that actually get pumped through a compiler and end up building a style sheet for us on the fly. So if you sort of look at this, I want to blow this up. Nope, can't get that much bigger. Okay, so if you look at this is really cool like idea, right? So this is where he drew his inspiration. But imagine if this was just like a JavaScript object that you just like you define your type of div and you style it. And it's like you can make multiple divs that you could basically create an entire grid system throughout your application and then just pass them in as components to where you need them to run. So I think that's a really, really cool paradigm. It's a really hot topic. And look, there's only 9 open issues. And that's what's super cool. Like in like this package that Kent sort of co-authored, there's 65,000 downloads in the last week, 12,000 in the last day, and only 9 open issues. Like that's pretty phenomenal. So I highly recommend if like you don't want to write CSS like this, where you have a bunch of style sheets throughout your application, that you look into maybe these newer paradigms of writing JavaScript, writing your CSS in JavaScript basically, and then pumping it through the compiler. But for me, for purposes of this sprint or this lab, I really just like to define a style sheet when I'm doing something simple, and then just make the minimum amount of styles that I need. So you can see I'm simply, okay, so I have a file here. Let's just look at my post container component, okay? So I'm importing in comment section. I'm importing in the styles that I've defined, okay? And I just create a file in my directory wherever I need it to live called postcontainerstyles.css or commentstyles.css, okay? So if I'm importing this in and in using create React app, they already have it built under the hood to handle this type of styling, okay? So you can use this like right out of the box with create React app. That's what makes it so nice, is you can just write your styles just right away and then import them into your components and then use them, right? So for us, we're looking at post container. So you look right here, I have a class name. So we use class name in React because class is a new keyword in JavaScript. So it's common practice to use class name instead of class. And React will read this, and when it turns this into HTML, it'll actually change it into a class. Okay, and I'll actually open the DOM for you in just a minute, and we'll see that. So, but I have a class name called post container, and so I can reference this post container as a class right here. And I just am putting a simple border, 1 pixel solid. You know, I like to do black, so my red, greens, and blues are black, and then just fade it a little bit with the opacity. So you can see that, you know, and what's cool about Visual Studio Code is I can play around with this. I can bump up the opacity and kind of see what it's going to give me like in real time. So I just kind of like 0.25. It's just a very, you know, that's a common border pixel, border radius. I could have done something where I just turned this into a gray instead and then did no opacity or anything. So, but yeah, I like to use RGBAs. That means a red, green, blue, and then I can't remember what A means. One of you gurus can correct me on that. And then, but to me, it just means opacity. So like the alpha, yeah. So the alpha, yeah, alpha is exactly what it means. So yeah, really common like pattern there. Nothing fancy. And then yeah, I just made the width 80%. I was going to center these, but I kind of ran out of time, and just gave each of my post containers a margin so that there's a gutter between each of my post containers. So my image wrapper is just 500 by 500 pixels. I wanted it to be the big poppy image. And then I just gave every single one of my images a height of 100%. So that way it just fits that container. So if you look at this, so remember I told you I was going to look at the DOM here. So in our post container, you see that we have class name post container here. But after it goes through React's DOM diffing and gets reconciled to the DOM, it just basically just turns it into class and then post container. So very straightforward. And then, okay, so with my thumbnail, I just have like a height and width of 40 pixels each, and then like a little margin of 10 pixels. And then my image itself was 50% border radius to make it a circle. And then I just kept the same height 100%. So if you look at that, this is what those styles are. So these are just some common like patterns that I know that I've used like over and over and over again in my career, just to like get, you know, really good, you know, solid, you know, reusable like styles all over the place, because I have an image tag that's 100%. So anywhere that's an image, I can just use that image class, right? And then this one I wanted to specify it's a thumbnail image because I wanted it to be a 50% border radius, where I didn't want my actual main image to be so, okay? And then remember, all I'm doing, because we're using Create React App, we can just import in our CSS. And basically what we're doing by this is telling our React component to be aware of these styles so that when it dumps them to the screen, we actually have style sheet like just given to us. So I'm wondering, yeah, so check it out. Inside these style tags, you'll find each one of these CSS files, okay? So, and the bummer is, well, I guess we're rendering. So this will only print this to the DOM like this in these style tags. It'll go, and basically what it's gonna do, it's gonna take all of my CSS files in my application and dump them into a style tag when it's needed. So if I wasn't rendering this component right now, I wouldn't need the post container. If I was rendering a different component right now, it would pull in the styles that are just specific to that container. And what this allows you to do is you can look in your, so you can create some global styles somewhere and just import them and keep them for your your overall like message. So if I was to write some global styles, I would do it in index.css, and all of my global styles would just live here forever. And then it's like I need to inherit from that. Like, oh yeah, I have that class that I've already built, and it's like all the reusable styles. But then when you needed style specific components, you would bust them out into their own files like this. So that's just to go where Roland took us. I definitely agree with you. Styling is everything to me in CSS is an edge case. Okay, everything, and that's like that comes from like a couple years of working as a front end dev. Okay, I think that CSS is awesome. There's so much you can do with it, but I learn every single time I use it. And it really, yes, Thompson, it really is an art. Like if you become really good at CSS, it means that you've spent a lot of time doing it. It's not just like, oh, I understand the paradigm, so I know exactly everything. No, it takes a lot of research. So those of you who are really good, seems like Frank maybe came from like a designer background, or he's done a lot of this before in his life. So it seems like he may have this experience with working in CSS a lot. And the more you work with it, the more you pick up the tips and tricks. It's pretty cool. But these are common things that I've seen all over the place. So strong, yes. The best CSS, like, developer, the best person is the best Googler, right? Because I mean, that's the number one question or answer to any question that I had with interaction between my former boss was, how do I do this? He's like, I don't know, let's Google it. It's like, he's like, that was his best answer. So, and it's like, eventually he just taught me, he's like, just Google it. Like, let me Google that for you was always his joke with me. So,
I just wanted to throw in that with CSS, like if you have a strong drive to do beautiful graphic design, then CSS is a great avenue for you to do that beautiful graphic design. But if you do not, if you are here at Lambda and you don't have any pictures in your head for making a beautiful website, in my opinion, don't sweat it, okay? Because in basically 10 years of professional experience, I don't think anybody ever asked me to draw the pretty pictures, okay? Your job is not to draw the pretty pictures. There's a whole department for drawing pretty pictures, and they are going to tell you what they want it to look like. And you will need to practice your CSS until you can make the website look like somebody else's pretty picture, kind of like in the last assignment where it was, make your page look like Lambda School. But it's almost never going to be your job to actually come up with what the pretty website should look like. So if you don't have any pretty ideas, don't sweat it, but do practice copying other people's stuff. That's all I wanted to throw in. Sorry, Ryan.
No, that's fantastic. I love anything you have to contribute always makes my life nicer, and it just solidifies kind of what I'm trying to get at. So cool. Thanks for jumping in. Okay, so I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes and just talking about how I architected this solution, and then what we'll do is we'll have you guys, those who want to share, you can share with us your styles and your code, and we can see like your working solution. And then, okay, so I just wanted to talk about like the architecture of this. All right, so we have a post container, comment section, and then a search bar, right? Those were all part of the sprint. So basically my search bar, I'm not actually doing a search on anything, but I could whip it up and finish it. I kind of wanted to like get everything on the screen and then style it a little bit for you guys and make sure that it was good to go. But yeah, I basically have some post data that's given to us from the beginning. I just map over that. So I create a new post for every post, and then I just basically render a post container for each post that I have. So if you look at my app down here from React DevTools, you'll see that inside app, this is the parent of our application. And then we have a search bar, so this has two siblings. Well, I guess it has three siblings four siblings because we're rendering out a post container for every single object is really what's going on. But yeah, so we have the search bar and then just kind of a little quick stuff in there. And then, so for each one of these post containers, I render out a comment section. So let's go to post container and let's look at that. So really, I could actually refactor this. I thought I was going to need state, but I don't. So I could actually refactor this real quick to just use, and because we don't need the render method, We don't need the life cycle. We just need props, right? So if I refactored this, put props in here, okay, instead of calling everything on this dot, I'm going to have to change my entire approach, which is fine. This is something I do, I've done a lot of, is, refactor code when I don't need it the way it needs to be. So, and then I just need to take out every instance of this. So now we should still be rendering. And if you look at this, what's cool about it is there's a way to, we can select this, and then I can look at the console, and then I can see what's pointing to my $R. So I showed you this is like the thing that's given to us from the React Dev Tools. And so you can see now it's a stateless component. I didn't need that class. If I just had the class like given to it, it would have recognized that it was more of, there was a little bit more bloat there. So that way now I can get rid of component because I'm not even using it. And it just makes for a little bit more, this is a little bit like, it's just a JavaScript function. That's all this is. You see, this is just JavaScript and then a return statement that has a block of some random HTML elements, right? That's just JSX. And then we have props that come in and we're rendering them out. So what I have here is just a wrapper divs, because remember, in React 15, you can only render one component per render statement. So like per component, you can only render one DOM element. Now, what's cool about that, and like a preview of things to come and all the nerdy stuff that's coming out with React 16, is there's a way you can actually render out siblings, and you get rid of all this like what we call tag bloat. Because there's some people, like a lot of times it's like, oh, I have all these siblings and I don't need a wrapper div, but I have a div because I have to have it, right? So what's interesting is that we get this new syntax and the React Fiber API will allow us to actually render siblings, which is going to be fantastic. And I'll do like a little like what's new in React 16 once it is stable enough to like be using it a bunch. I think right now it may be in beta or barely reaching beta at this point. So once it's more stable and more common, I'll do like a cool like brown bag on it and show you all the cool new things coming out. So, but yeah, for now, it's just a single component, or it's just a single div. It's a wrapper, and then we have our image. So I wrapped this in a div, this image here, which is like just our thumbnail image at top. And then you see like this one down here, and then we have the last one here. And then I just have a span for the user's name, and then another div, and then an image inside of that to display like what the post image is, because that's what Instagram's all about. It's all about photos. And then we render our comment section. So inside our comment section here, you can see I actually did need state to render out my comments, and then to like add comments to the state. And I didn't do a delete comment, but I could do that pretty trivially at this point. But yeah, so all I'm doing is on component did mount, setting the comments so that I have them on my state. Okay, that's the only reason I needed this lifecycle method, is just to basically think of it like I'm just grabbing what's coming down on props and I'm putting it on my state so that I have control of it in this component. Okay, and then I have my functions bound here. And then this one is just our handle change comment function. It just takes the element's target value and sets it on text. And then, I could have just done this now that I want to refactor. This never refactor in a live demo. But yeah, I could have just simplified the code there, already seeing things that make it a little bit more readable. And then, yeah, so I have a submit button, and I needed to prevent the default, because if you hit submit on a button, it'll automatically refresh the page. So this prevent default gets fired to prevent that default behavior on when the element gets triggered there. And then I grab the comments from state. I create a new object, which is my comment object, and I give myself a username. And then I push my comment in, and then I set my state again. And I could have done this as well. Once again, never live code in a demo. Actually, it's cool. All right, so then I reset the comments, and then I wanted to reset my single comment so that when I added a comment to this Instagram post, I could type it, and then my input field, like, wow, what a cool, just like, what a cool. All right, so, and then it just resets that input field, which is why I reset the input there. And the reason that works is because I set the value of this input field. This input field's value, I didn't need this ref. I thought I was going to use it, but I didn't. But this value could be set to what is on state. So now you have a completely controlled input field. So, all right, that is my my quick and dirty solution. But the real deal is seeing what you guys were able to come up with this and how close you got to it. So I think Frank was super stoked. If you want to go ahead, Frank, and show us where you got to, I think that would be really, really fun.
Okay, guess I'll go first. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, there's.
Ooh. Wait. This is the mock-up, right?
Yeah.
Nice work, dude. This is awesome. Holy cow.
And with Ryan's help, I finally got the nav bar to transition when I scrolled.
Oh, cool.
That was the last thing I did. That's pretty cool.
All right, it looks pretty. Is it functional?
Yeah. I even have the modal thing there, and did the extra credit for the human readable date.
Oh, nice. What about did you get the like button at all? Or the?
Oh,
no. No, that's cool. Not a big deal. Sweet. All right, do you want to walk us through some things that you maybe learned? Like you said, you did this transition thing. Like, what's cool about it? Let's look at some of your styles.
Let's see. So the architecture is pretty much the same as yours. I just have the nav in its own like nav section, and then the rest of the content in a div here. Like that. Let me show the code. So here, it's all wrapped in the div wrapper. And I have the map function creating a new article for each post. As far as CSS goes, do you guys have any questions about CSS?
Yeah, I want to see how you handled your scroll transition.
Okay, so that was here. Component did mount. I added an event listener for the window that looks for scroll. And for the handle scroll event, I did an if statement, because if you scroll, you'll see like the different values. That's how far it is from the top of the window. So I did an if statement. If it's greater than 100 from the top, then I changed the class name for the nav bar. Change it from that to that. And I pretty much changed the height and I shifted it to the top by 13 pixels.
All right, that's awesome. Where does your handle scroll function get called? Is it you're listening it on scroll? Oh, right there. Okay, you're passing it to the event listener. That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I've done a very similar thing where, like, on component did mount, I mounted an event listener that listened for window resize, and then it just called this resize, and then just basically was able to like style a bunch of stuff. It was like the most janky way to like reset tables and stuff, I think, that I ever came up with. But when it worked, it was really exciting because everyone at the company was like, why don't we have tables that resize? And I'm like, well, because they're tables and it sucks building tables. So anyway, nice work. Adding an event listener so it's really important. And I just want to talk about this right here on line 18 to 20. You have your component will unmount. So when that gets called, when this component leaves the screen, right? So if you were to mount another component at this point, basically what would happen is this would allow you to trigger an event when this current component that we're looking at actually leaves the DOM. Okay, so that's a lifecycle method that I'm actually really excited that you guys got into, and we can talk about it now. So if you didn't handle your event listener like destruction right here, so basically you're destroying this event listener, like taking it away so it's not going to like leak into other events. Or if you were to like transition pages or whatever, it's not going to still be there. You only want it there when you need it, right? So this is the perfect way to handle, removing an event listener from your DOM. And then, does anyone know like what an event listener is? Or I mean, do you know enough about them to like, teach the class a little bit about event listeners, like what they do?
I probably can't articulate it as well as you can, so you go ahead.
No, that's fine. So if you go over to the MDN spec, it's a web API that exists, in our browsers, okay? And basically what it allows us to do is to like create these listeners that are bound to functions that we have control over, okay? There's event listeners all the time when you have stuff, because like if there wasn't something like basically a state, so think about your web page. Your web page loads and there's a state in this web page, and that state is like, okay, here's the current existing, like what our web page looks like, okay, what our application looks like. And there's buttons and there's all these things that are looking around waiting for something to happen. Now, they're just gonna sit there until somebody clicks on them. So there's an on-click event that gets emitted when somebody clicks on a button, and that just comes natively out of the box. So when you click a button, the window itself, the objects in JavaScript, is looking for that event. When that happens, it triggers the event, and you can react to that, and you can now make a change and write code that reacts to it. When we add our own event listeners or remove our own event listeners, what we're doing is we're sort of tapping into that web API, and it allows us to control specific things that we wouldn't otherwise have control over. There is definitely scroll events, but like what we did, or what Frank did when he started scrolling, is he's like, hey, listen for scrolls, right now, and when somebody scrolls on this page, like tell me about it and fire this function. So you pass it that string, what you want to call your event listener, and then and so in this case, we're selecting the scroll event, and then we're basically giving our own piece of function of code that can listen for that. And when changes happen, we can do something with it, which is why when he scrolls, you can see the distance between his little scroll bar on the side from the top of the page, which is exactly what, the event that he's tapped into. So awesome. Good stuff, Frank. Is that kind of clear, like what event listeners do? Does anyone have any questions about them? Yeah, somebody asked Frank, what theme are you using in VS Code?
Oh, I think it's material theme.
And then what font is that?
Oh, that's Fire Code.
Okay. All right. Anyone else want to share? Okay, Dylan.
Cool. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I kind of just went for an exact replica here, and I added some features here. You know, the like, or when you like it, it adds the like, changes the red. And then for comments down here, you can add whatever comment you want. I don't have like a delete comment or way to delete it, but you can add them. And then when you click here, the modal or whatever it's called pops up, and you can like report something. So like if you click on this, it tells you the report has been submitted, and I set a timeout on that so that goes away after 3 seconds there. So those are just the features that I added to mine.
Wow, that's awesome. Is there anything code specific? I mean, this looks amazing. Is there anything code specific you wanna walk us through or show us about?
The setting up the modal was the most difficult part. I kind of just set a huge div here, and it just overlays over the whole thing, and then I display it when in the state changes to true, and then it gets displayed. And I have the set timeout function in here when the component updates. If it's displaying I call it thanks, then the set timeout runs and it changes it to false after 3 seconds. So that's what I did for that.
That's amazing. Awesome stuff. So yes, component did update is another like really awesome lifecycle method. So I'm really impressed that so far the two who've shared tapped into some of the lifecycle methods that we haven't like talked about in class. So is there anything else you want to talk about, Dylan, or who's next?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. Does anyone else want to share? Even if it's not like, don't worry, because these have been really pretty fantastic. Looks like Ryan published his to his GitHub. There it is. Nice. Okay, so I'll just share. Maybe, in fact, Ryan, do you want me to share? Do you want to walk us through it and show us some code, or?
Hey, you go for it.
Okay. I'll just, so what I can do, I'll just share the screen. Okay, so this is published to, Ryan's GitHub.io account, his Instagram clone. It looks like things are sort of responsive, and I can start to click and look at stuff. So is this the material theme you're using here?
Yeah, those are the material UI components.
Okay. Ooh, and then you performanced it. So did you run Webpack for production?
Yeah, I ran the build script.
Okay. So that basically what that does is it zips up his code to change all of his components to T's and P's and R's and whatever. It just like basically minifies your code and makes it nice and chill. But this is essentially his state tree here, his application tree. It looks like we could drill down. It looks like these are, okay, so this is an individual component that I'm clicking on. Cool. And look, like React goes and just shoves a bunch of it'll shorten all of your class names. It's pretty cool. Okay. Unless you change these class names yourself to like C8, C14, and C1.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. Looks like that's something that React did to add your performance. So, all right. So as we scroll, okay, so let's look at this. So yeah, we got this nice little box shadow. A little bit of a gap there. This is sweet. You got box shadows around each one of your cards. Looks like we can like it. We can add a comment. Cool. View all. Ooh, he hid the comments and then he viewed them all. I kind of want to see how you did that. I'm curious if you don't mind sharing.
Sure, I don't mind sharing.
Cool.
my screen here. All right, can you see that window?
Yep.
Cool. So let's see, that would be the comments section. Oops, let's test. So I just have an onExpand method that sets a variable in the state to expanded, and then it's using the collapse component from Material UI. Basically, it handles all the work for you. And I just have a comment section in there to write out each individual comment.
Awesome, that's good. So yeah, we did say you could use Bootstrap or another library of your choice to get some of these styles and like transitions and things taken care of. So that's good stuff. Cool, man. This is fun. I'm gonna continue to just like think around with it. It's kind of nice. Awesome. And then you have your username hard coded, of course, because it's Fighter Tech that comes in. Cool.
Yep.
Sweet. Okay. Anyone else? I mean, if you're not super stoked about how it looks or how far you got, I mean, it'd be really good for anybody to just jump on and like tell us something they learned, something they were really frustrated with maybe. And then they came over like the camel's hump of that frustration and then came out victorious on the other side. Any takers in that regard? Awesome. Sam, why don't you go ahead and show something for us? That's fine. We'll just hang out for a sec. So yeah, what's really awesome is that, a few of you were able to get to this really fun functioning like piece of code, right? Like it's really cool to like build your portfolios like with this type of stuff. So if you didn't get this far, don't worry because that's fine. Like you're gonna still continue to learn. It's not about like where you are in regards to where your peers are at. It's about where you are when you started this program and where you are when you end this program. That's the only race that you are competing in. Okay, it's not about like, it's not a race against your peers. It's a race against yourself. And so don't beat yourself up if you didn't get this far on this sprint and you weren't able to like get a full clone of Instagram built. So that's just something that, if you compare yourself to your peers, you're never gonna feel successful. But if you compare yourself to yourself and you're like, man, I suffered through something and like I got pretty far with it and I'm really, really proud that I just got data to print on the screen. So that's how I approach everything. So, all right, Sam, how we doing?
All right, I got it set up. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, so mine is not super functional, but I just might as well show mine. Share screen. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
All right, so I'm way more comfortable with the front end kind of stuff, so I was able to kind of do that pretty well. But as you can see, my dates and stuff aren't modified. And you can't really add a comment. You can type, but it doesn't really do anything. My thing doesn't scroll down. So like I said, not functional, but looks fine in my opinion.
I think it looks fantastic. I think you did a great job. Should we see how you're handling submit comments and try and debug it in the next 8 minutes?
In the next 8 minutes. If it's not an issue, like I think that would take a little long.
Okay. Maybe after, I mean, now that you've seen how I did mine, and we
yeah, Yeah, I'm definitely going to refactor this and try to get everything to work.
Cool. Right on. Well done, Sam. This looks great.
Thanks.
Cool. All right. Okay, Eric commented and said, I didn't get a lot done because I was anxious or nervous about my one-on-one. So just moving forward, just don't be nervous or anxious about those one-on-ones. You guys, now that you've gone through them, those who have gone through them, we're still kind of getting to the tail end of everyone who needs to be checked in with. Well, everyone's being checked in this. It's not like there's a select few. So the one-on-ones, they're really just designed for us to really get to know you and know your code style and know a little bit about you, and then keep track of that as the course goes along. Because there's so many of you and there's so few of us, we want to be able to like provide a platform with that one-on-one check-in and then just like provide feedback on stuff. So really the only purpose of them is to make you better and to make us know you so that we can serve you better, okay? So that's, if you're nervous about those moving forward, please don't be. We're going to give you challenges that we can work through together, that you're potentially just going to be able to knock out of the park. And it's really going to just set you up for like interviewing in general. Because I've sat there in an interview, one of the last interviews I had to whiteboard. So on a whiteboard, write out a React component that has a function that would then print, that would be called on component did mount or whatever, and then save that to state, and then when the component loaded, it would print out the Fibonacci sequence of a number given on that function. So it was like really kind of some trivial things, but like I had to whiteboard it, and I had a broken hand, and it was like crazy. I had like a big cast on my hand, and like so I wrote out this like recursive function, and I did it, and it was just like it was me just joking with them the whole time. I'm like, "Are you sure you don't want me to use my left hand? Because you can't even read this; it's not legible." So that familiarity piece wasn't for me to tell you that like, oh, I'm so great because I was able to do this and get this job. It's to tell you that like we're preparing you for that type of situation, for when you get in front of somebody and you have to talk about your code and talk about the theory behind it as well, and then implement something. Because that's a lot of times that's just how it's going to be when you move into these positions, when you move into these interviews. So when we're interviewing you and we're checking in with you, it's really just to make you more comfortable with that. It's not like, oh, Eric, man, you really blew it on this thing. I think we're going to push you back a couple months. That's not what we're going to do. If there are major red flags, we'll take care of them, okay? But we're here, like we're doing these check-ins to provide you with that like interaction of talking about your code, your thought processes, and how you implement things. So relax, man. And yeah, maybe, on your break week, you could go back to React 2 after you've got like a bunch more of these tools in your tool belt. You could go back and refactor and actually like, get it functioning on the screen. So, cause we have break week and then we have a solo lab where in a few weeks, you guys, like in like 3 weeks or 4 weeks from now, you guys get 2 days to build a project on your own and just like own it. You build it from scratch. It's really up to you what you do. So yeah, that's where you'll be able to like start. We had students go back and just redo all the sprints, like as many as they could. So, all right. Is there anyone else who wants to share in the last 4 minutes? If not, we can kind of break early, and then Ty's going to put you guys into your lab review, and then yeah, just keep your day flowing like that. One thing I can do, instead of just letting you go, I can just sort of show you what's to come today with this Redux stuff that you're going to be learning. And you're going to be learning about this like right away. So I'll just spend the next 3 minutes going over this thing called Redux. All right, so lately you guys have been really like learning about React, and you've been learning about this thing called state. Now, there's an inherent problem with this, and I drew it out for you last week when we were talking about it. So let me unshare and let me just talk about this for 2 seconds. Okay, And you're going to get a full like lab on this, and it's going to become more clear what I'm talking about in just a minute. I'm just giving you a heads up on this stuff. So let's say we have our application tree, and it looks a lot like this, where we have a single parent, and it's probably talking to a server somewhere that's talking to a database, and our server lives right here as the communication piece in between the two, right? So, and they're sending communication back and forth. This is just another computer somewhere, and then this is your computer, your client here. And then this holds your state, okay? And so like on component did mount, we're fetching data, pulling it back from the server, and then sending down the changes to that data to our children. Now, as your application grows and you get more and more children, this can become more complicated when you have multiple states, multiple components that share different types of states. So what the paradigm of Redux has done is it's actually taken that outside of our application. So to sort of just like theorize what's going on here, say you have like some sibling, you know, children components that your application's using all over the place. And, you know, this is kind of a bad rendering right there. Sorry, I'm not an artist. I'm just a developer. So instead of using this this state object for like the big things that like communicate with our server, okay, let's say we have a server here, it's just a big old computer with all our stuff, and then it's talking to our database or whatever. You're gonna get into like learning how to build this stuff too later on. So like right now we're only talking about the front end, okay? So when we have this communication piece here, we're getting changes and we're sending them back. Now we use this thing called a store, which sort of sits at the top of our application. So when a user clicks a button, that button will then like dispatch out an action, okay? So you have actions that are like listening, they're like event listeners sort of in Redux. And that action tells a reducer that something has changed. Now you have this thing called reducers. And something's changed, and then it basically goes and updates that store, so all of these changes get built to the DOM. But all the updates happen in this reducer. And then they basically just change some stuff and then send it to say, hey, something updated, and everything, you know, then trickles down. And it's really, really cool way to think about your applications going forward. So that is my high-level view, the highest of high-level views of Redux that I could give you in 3 minutes. So Redux in 3 minutes, you guys are professional by now, right? So nope, hold on to your hats. It's going to be a really, really fun afternoon, and I'm excited to like respond and answer questions because I love this technology. I think it's really, really cool. So have a great afternoon, guys. I'm going to end this meeting, and then later on I'll post your video because I'm going to run to a doctor's appointment. So I'll see you guys later this afternoon and evening. So